Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray and today I am going to show you the differences between cross-stitching fabrics. This is not comprehensive. There are a lot of different fabric types out there in the universe, but these are 3 identically dyed pieces of fabric from a company called Stitch Me. I really like Stitch Me. I am not sponsored and these were not sent to me for free. I purchased all these, but here we have Aida, Lugana, and linen. These are all the same size and they're all the same color. They're all the same count, though on these tags you will see that they say this one says 14, this one says 28, and this one says 28. So I will explain in just a moment. So let's get started. Let's start with Aida. You get a vibrant color. You get a gridded, almost gridded fabric where you can definitely see each square and the holes where you're supposed to put your needle into. You see those very well. So a lot of people say that Aida is great for beginners. I say that Aida is great if you want to be able to see where you're stitching. It is really good if you have poor eyesight or if you just don't want to use magnifiers for smaller stitching. And you will get a very vibrant and bright piece of fabric. However, there is a con. The con is that some people say that if you're stitching something that isn't full coverage on Aida and you go to frame it, that you'll see this gridded, it almost looks like Excel or something. You'll see this grid in the background and then you'll have your stitching and it's distracting. I don't feel that way, but some people do feel that way, and that's why there are other fabrics available as well. But if you're a beginner or if you just struggle with seeing, Aida is the way to go. You'll get a very vibrant fabric and it's easy to stitch on. Now 14 count Aida is the same stitch size as 28 count in Lugana, linen, Evenweave in general. I will put a link in the description of a website that's really good to explain the differences in the count, but basically there are 14 little squares per inch. So if you count 14 little squares, that is, if you go 1 inch, there are 14 squares. I can explain things. But if we look at the Lugana and the linen, I hope that you can see this, but hear me out. These two, Aida and linen, are natural fibers. So Lugana has viscose in it, which is not a plant fiber, but these two are 100% plant material. And I don't know if you can tell, but the Lugana is not as mottled as these two. The variegation in the color on this is much more smooth. You can see that the colors here look like that tie-dyed look. It looks like smoke. If we look at all the different angles of this fabric, you'll be able to see that it's very like smoky and pretty. In that way, it's very dark in some places and very light in the other areas. But, and that was the same with this Aida fabric. But if we look closely at the Lugana, we can see, ooh, we can definitely tell that this looks much more solid than the other fabrics. So what is the difference between an Evenweave and a linen? You're probably asking. So if you can tell, this is Evenweave and this is linen. Evenweave has a very, very even warp and weft. Those are the threads that go up and down and side to side. But with linen, you can tell that it's not as even. We have threads here that are much thicker in some places, and they call those slubs. Sometimes a slub is so big that it gets annoying and it can change the size of your stitch. So some people will meticulously go through and they will actually remove the threads. Now, I am not an expert stitcher. I've only started stitching at the end of 2019. So I can't tell you how to do that, but there are lots of videos on YouTube that could, if you wanted to. But just for beginners, this is the difference. This is what a linen looks like. And this is what an Evenweave, and specifically a Lugana. Now, Lugana has viscose. The other one, Jobelin, has rayon. And then there's other ones. There's lots of Evenweaves out there, okay? But you're going to notice a few different things. Evenweaves, like this Lugana, this is a little bit stiffer. When you pull your thread through, you'll hear a little bit of a pull or a screech, as Heike has told me. Whereas linen has bigger holes. They are different sizes, and pulling your thread through them feels like it's pulling through butter. So for some people, they much prefer linen over Lugana because they don't like the sound, the squeakiness of the Evenweaves. For me personally, there are different projects that I want on linen than on Evenweave. Evenweave, I find, is really beautiful for stitches where I want a very neutral background and I don't want a lot of distracting modeling. Whereas linen, if I really want the background to show up and I want it to be in your face, or if I want a really relaxing stitching session, I will choose the linen. However, linen is much harder to count. And I have a video on how to count and how to stitch on Evenweave, I believe it is, where you skip a hole if you're going over 2. That's a whole other video. But these are the differences. So you can tell that this is a very natural linen. This is a natural material. It's very drapey. It's very squishy. A lot of linens are incredibly pliable and even just gorgeous to touch and to hold. Whereas I believe that Lugana and other Evenweaves are just really fun to stitch on because they aren't as difficult to see the holes as linen, but it still doesn't have the Aida appearance. So it has a very flat appearance without the obvious differences in the quote unquote like graph paper or very harsh look of an Aida. One thing that I forgot to mention is that compared to these two, Aida is much stiffer. The only exception to that rule is if you're getting Charles Craft, which is 8% silk. But in general, Aida is a stiffer material because it is cotton. This one is not. But if you purchase directly from a manufacturer like Zweigart, instead of a hand dyer, you're going to get a very starchy fabric. If you're trying to decide on a piece of fabric for a particular cross-stitch pattern, one thing that I definitely recommend you think about is whether the piece has fractional stitches or not. If the piece has fractional stitches, it would be much easier to use an Evenweave or a linen. And that's because you'll have an obvious hole in the middle of where each X is. You'll be passing over a hole in the middle so that you can do that 3/4 stitch or that quarter stitch without having to pierce fabric. You can pierce Aida fabric, but it is much harder to do. It is super easy to do that on these two fabrics. Another thing that you're really going to want to do, which I explained in my last how to cross stitch video, is you're going to want to really carefully determine the size of fabric that you want before you buy it and before you start stitching. There are obvious tips like make sure that you're stitching in the right orientation, because it's very easy to mess that up. You want to make sure that you're stitching in the right direction. You've got your fabric orientated the correct way in your hoop or in your Q-snap or your scroll frame. Definitely make sure that you find the right size for your piece. Check out that video for more information, and just make sure that you choose the fabric that will be easiest for you to stitch on, because the easier it is to stitch on for you, the more enjoyable it'll be in the long run. And if that means that you're stitching a Bella Filipina or a Mirabilia on Aida, so be it. You can do that. There are no rules in cross stitch. You do what is best for you. But those are the major differences in these pieces of fabric. I hope that this helps you to determine which one you want. And remember that all of these can be made opalescent. All of them. You can go as sparkly as you want, and there are no rules whatsoever. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope that it's helped. If you have any more questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Open up that description box for more information and links that'll help you. And I hope to see you in my next video. Take care, everyone. Bye!